Aarav Malhotra thought he had finally escaped his old life, but one hidden truth was powerful enough to destroy everything he built overnight. Calvin Mercer believed he married the love of his life, unaware that a digital trail of dark secrets was already closing in on him. Ritika Sen resurfaced at the worst possible moment, threatening to expose a past Aarav prayed would stay buried. Dylan Croft uncovered evidence that could shatter the perfect wedding before the couple even boarded their flight. And as Inspector Meera Rathore followed the clues, the shocking truth behind the wedding night tragedy spiraled into a nightmare no one saw coming. Aarav Malhotra had spent most of his 26 years dreaming of something bigger than the narrow streets of his hometown in Jaipur. He wanted a life where he could breathe without worrying about money, where he didn't have to watch his parents struggle, and where he could finally feel like he mattered. For years, he believed that the only path to that life was through working harder, earning more, and saving every rupee he could. But life didn't reward him the way he expected. He worked small jobs, shifted between companies, and found himself stuck in a cycle that felt impossible to escape. Everything changed the day he met Calvin Mercer. Calvin was nothing like anyone Aarav had met before. Calm, self-assured, successful, and carrying an effortless charm that immediately drew attention. He had arrived in India for a short business trip, but a chance encounter with Aarav in a cafe became the moment that rewrote both their futures. Calvin was fascinated by Aarav's soft-spoken nature and the way he talked about wanting to improve his family's situation. Aarav, on the other hand, saw in Calvin a doorway to the life he had wanted for years. Their conversations grew quickly, filled with promises and dreams. Calvin admired Aarav's determination and innocence. Aarav admired Calvin's stability and confidence. Their bond intensified so fast that even close friends wondered if it was too sudden. But to the couple, it felt like fate. They believed the universe had brought them together at the exact moment they needed each other the most. When Calvin proposed the idea of marriage, Aarav said yes instantly. His parents were shocked at how fast everything was happening, but they trusted their son's decision. They wanted him to be happy, and if that happiness came through a partnership with someone who clearly valued him, they saw no reason to object. Calvin's family, watching from Canada, expressed mild concern over the speed of the relationship, but Calvin's excitement reassured them. The wedding was planned in a beautiful blend of Indian tradition and modern simplicity. The courtyard of a heritage hotel lit up with golden lights, soft music, and guests dressed in a spectrum of colors. Everyone felt the energy of celebration, the kind that makes people believe the future will only bring good things. Aarav wore a deep maroon sherwani that matched the soft glow of the lamps around him, while Calvin chose a tailored cream suit that contrasted beautifully with the vibrant surroundings. As the rituals began, whispers among guests carried admiration for how well the couple complemented each other. Calvin looked at Aarav with genuine affection, the kind that felt deep and unforced. Aarav smiled throughout the ceremony, a smile so perfect and warm that even those who barely knew him felt happy for him. Cameras flashed, capturing moments that looked almost cinematic, two lives joining in harmony, families merging, and a hopeful future beginning right in front of everyone. But behind that smile, Aarav carried a pressure that no one could see. Every step he took down the floral aisle, every blessing he received, every congratulatory handshake he shared, felt like a reminder of the life he was leaving behind and the new expectations placed on him. He felt the weight of becoming someone better, someone worthy of the new path unfolding before him. Yet deep within, he also felt a twinge of fear that his past, the part he never spoke about, might someday come back to haunt him. Still, the wedding went on beautifully, shining brighter than any celebration his family had ever hosted. People danced, laughed, and ate as though the night could go on forever. Calvin's eyes never left Aarav for long, admiring the man he believed he truly knew. Little did he realize that tiny cracks in the perfect picture had already started. Forming cracks hidden so carefully under layers of charm and celebration. As the final moments of the ceremony approached, the crowd cheered, and petals rained down on the newlyweds. Aarav held Calvin's hand tightly, but inside, he felt the walls closing in. He had entered a marriage built on love, but also on secrets he hoped would never surface. What no one knew, not even Calvin, was that the wedding they celebrated so joyfully would mark the beginning of a tragedy that would soon shock two countries and leave an entire family searching for answers. The perfect wedding was only the calm before the storm, and the night ahead would begin revealing the truth Aarav hoped would stay hidden forever. When the wedding celebrations finally ended, Aarav Malhotra felt a strange mixture of excitement and fear. He stood in his decorated bedroom surrounded by flowers, gifts, and the sweet smell of incense lingering from the rituals. This was supposed to be the beginning of a new life, one filled with opportunity, love, and security in Canada. Calvin had promised him stability, a future where he didn't have to worry about unpaid bills, broken promises, or endless job searches. But as Aarav looked at the packed suitcases in the corner, a small voice in his mind whispered reminders of something he tried hard to forget. His past was not gone. It was only waiting for the right moment to return. Calvin, delighted with the thought of flying home with his new husband, moved around the room with the ease of someone who trusted completely. He talked about their future apartment in Toronto, the snow Aarav would see for the first time, and the places he wanted to show him. Aarav nodded, smiled, and pretended to share the same excitement. But the truth was far darker. He had lived years hiding things from everyone around him. That life had not disappeared. It had simply been pushed aside, buried under the noise of a beautiful wedding. The morning after the ceremony, small inconsistencies started appearing, ones that Calvin noticed but brushed off. Aarav's explanation about his old job changed slightly each time he spoke about it. His story about how he saved money seemed unclear. He avoided questions about his college years. Calvin convinced himself these were normal gaps. After all, people forget details when they're overwhelmed. But something about the way Aarav hesitated before answering made him feel uneasy, even though he didn't want to admit it. Meanwhile, far from the celebrations, Ritika Sen sat in a dim apartment in Delhi, scrolling through her phone. She had been Aarav's partner during the worst period of his life, when both of them worked on a small online operation built on manipulating lonely strangers for money. They pretended to be different people, created convincing stories, and extracted payments through fake romantic promises. It was a world filled with lies, risk, and quick money. Aarav had walked away from it months before meeting Calvin, but Ritika had not. She blamed him for leaving her behind when things became complicated and police started taking interest. The moment she heard about Aarav's glamorous wedding through a mutual acquaintance, bitterness flared inside her. She knew he had escaped the life they built together, and now he was preparing to move to Canada while she remained stuck, hiding from legal trouble. Ritika's anger grew into desperation. She needed money, and she needed it fast. So she reached out to Aarav with a single message, one that sent panic straight through his chest. She threatened to expose everything if he didn't pay her before leaving India. She had screenshots, old chat logs, and enough proof to destroy the new life he was building. Aarav froze when he read the message. The wedding glow evaporated, replaced by dread. He tried to think of a way out. Should he block her? Should he pay her? Should he ignore the threat? None of those answers felt safe. If Ritika exposed him, everything he had built with Calvin would crumble. Calvin would see not just the lies, but the intention behind them. He might believe Aarav married him only for immigration and financial gain. As the hours passed, Aarav felt the walls closing in. Calvin noticed his distant behavior and asked if he was feeling unwell. Aarav blamed stress and lack of sleep, tried to hide the tremble in his hands. Meanwhile, Calvin's friend Dylan prepared for their arrival in Canada. He liked Aarav from the little he knew, but was naturally cautious. When Calvin told him that some of Aarav's old job stories didn't fully add up, Dylan decided to quietly run a background check, not out of suspicion but out of concern for his friend's safety. What he discovered was unsettling. There were traces of old complaints, reports from anonymous users, and online accounts linked to Aarav's name. Nothing was concrete, but it pointed toward a darker history. Without telling Calvin yet, Dylan began digging deeper. And with every new detail he uncovered, the picture became more disturbing. Aarav didn't know it yet, but danger was approaching from both sides. Ritika with her threats, and Dylan with his investigation. His perfect new life was standing on fragile ground, and with every passing hour, the cracks were widening. The truth he thought was buried was slowly rising to the surface, ready to destroy everything at the worst possible moment. The final night before the flight to Canada carried a strange heaviness, one that Aarav felt deep in his chest, even as everyone around him celebrated. The house was still glowing from the wedding, but the energy had shifted. The music had softened, the guests had settled into small groups, and the excitement of the previous day had faded into a calmer, more intimate atmosphere. Yet, for Aarav.com was the last thing he felt. Every time his phone vibrated, he feared it was Ritika sending another thread. Every time Calvin looked at him with genuine warmth, guilt twisted deeper inside him. He kept telling himself that everything would be fine once they reached Canada. He could just survive the next 24 hours. Calvin, meanwhile, was completely absorbed in planning their journey. He wanted Aarav to have the smoothest first experience of leaving India. He talked about the airport lounge, the Canadian climate, the cozy apartment waiting for them, and the job opportunities Aarav could explore. His excitement was sincere. To him, they were a team stepping into a new life together. He didn't know that the person he trusted most was sinking into fear behind every smile. While Aarav battled invisible pressure miles away in Canada, Dylan Croft sat in his apartment surrounded by glowing computer screens. He wasn't suspicious by nature, but something about Aarav's inconsistent background stories bothered him. Calvin was like family, and Dylan had always been protective. Running a background check felt more like due diligence than spying, but the deeper he searched, the more unsettling the details became. He found multiple online complaints tied to accounts with RAF's old email addresses. The reports described money disappearing, heartbroken victims claiming they'd been manipulated, and transactions routed through anonymous profiles. None of the evidence was strong enough on its own. But when Dylan cross-referenced names and dates, a disturbing pattern appeared. Aarav had not been the innocent, unlucky young man Calvin believed him to be. He had a history, one carefully hidden, polished, and buried beneath charm. Dylan's stomach tightened as he read through scanned screenshots posted by people who claimed to have been scammed emotionally and financially. Some messages contained phrases and writing styles that matched Aarav's social media posts. Dylan didn't want to believe it. He kept hoping the similarities were coincidence. But the more he compared, the more the truth stared back at him. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a trail that led straight to Calvin's new husband. Unable to ignore what he found, Dylan compiled everything into a private document. It included timeline comparisons, username matches, and archived complaints. He hesitated for a long time before sending it. Telling a newlywed that his partner might be hiding a criminal past wasn't something anyone wanted to do. But he also couldn't let Calvin walk into a future built on lies. After an hour of pacing, he finally clicked send. The file landed in Calvin's inbox just as the wedding celebration entered its final hour in India. Calvin opened the message in confusion, expecting travel details or a joke. Instead, the moment he saw the screenshots and claims, his heart dropped. He went through each item slowly, trying to convince himself that it was wrong, that someone else shared Aarav's name, that the evidence was exaggerated. But the similarities were undeniable. The digital footprints lined up too perfectly. His mind raced through every interaction with Aarav, every moment of hesitation, every half-formed explanation, every unanswered question. Suddenly, all those things took on a different meaning. Trust was replaced with suspicion. Love tangled with disbelief. Calvin felt a deep ache, not of anger, but of betrayal. He walked to the balcony of the house, away from the noise, trying to breathe. The man he had married, the man he believed he truly knew, now seemed like a stranger wrapped in secrets. Downstairs, Aarav felt his stomach twist when he noticed Calvin leaving the room with a stiff posture. Something was wrong. He knew it instantly. Panic spread through him as he replayed every risk, every secret, every message from Ritika. Had someone found something? Did Calvin know? Aarav moved toward the staircase, cold sweat forming on his forehead. Calvin stood alone, illuminated by the dim outdoor lights, holding his phone like it carried the truth Aarav feared most. The silence between them grew heavier with every passing second. A silence filled with suspicion, fear, and a truth that could destroy everything. What neither of them realized was that this silent, fragile moment was the final barrier before everything collapsed. By the time the night ended, their future would be changed forever, and only one of them would live to see the sunrise. The atmosphere inside the house felt strangely cold. Even though warm yellow lights still glowed from the wedding decor, the cheerful noise of the celebration slowly faded as guests began leaving, unaware of the emotional storm building upstairs. For Calvin, the night had changed in a matter of minutes. Only hours ago, he was a newlywed, filled with love and excitement for the future. But now, standing on the balcony with Dylan's file open on his phone, he felt something sharp crack deep inside him. Every screenshot, every complaint, every trace of ROF's earlier scams replayed in his mind like a warning he wished he had seen before, saying yes. ROF walked toward him with nervous steps, the weight of unspoken fear pulling at his chest. He could see from Calvin's stiff posture that the truth had surfaced. That hope of escaping his past, of leaving India with a clean slate shattered before he even reached the balcony. He stood a few feet away, his throat dry, his breathing uneven, unable to read Calvin's exact emotion. Was he angry? Heartbroken? Confused? The silence felt unbearable. Calvin didn't shout or accuse him. He didn't even ask questions. And somehow, that calmness terrified Aarav far more than anger ever could. Calvin simply looked at him with a mix of disappointment and pain, the type of expression that sinks straight into the gut. It was the look of someone who had opened his heart to another person, only to discover that the foundation of their relationship was built on lies. That look said more than words ever could. Calvin turned away and began walking down the stairs, not wanting to stay alone with the storm in his head. He wasn't sure what he was going to do next, but he knew he couldn't pretend everything was normal. He needed air, clarity, and distance from the man he no longer understood. He planned to call Inspector Meera Rathore, explain his concerns, and ask for advice. Something inside him told him to let the authorities handle it before things spiraled further. Aarav followed him. Every step, heavy and frantic. Fear tangled with desperation. He knew that if Calvin called the police, everything would fall apart: his marriage, his chance to leave India, the life he had built with false promises, and the future he had been clinging to. His mind raced with worst-case scenarios as he descended behind Calvin. Every heartbeat echoed his fear of losing everything in one night. Calvin reached the bottom of the staircase and stepped into the courtyard. The cool night air brushing against his face. He lifted his phone to call Meera. That small motion triggered something inside Aarav, something driven not by logic but pure panic. In that moment, he felt backed into a corner with no escape left. The voice in his head screamed that if he let Calvin make that call, everything was over. Aarav quickened his steps. His hands shook. The world around him blurred as he moved. He didn't think of consequences, morality, or the weight of what might happen next. He only thought of stopping Calvin from ending his future. Calvin sensed movement behind him just as he raised the phone to his ear. He began to turn, but he never fully rotated. Aarav's trembling hands reached out in panic. He grabbed Calvin's arm, trying to pull the phone away, trying to stop him from making the call. Calvin stepped back, startled. His foot slipped slightly on the smooth surface of the courtyard tiles. That one slip changed everything. Aarav reacted impulsively. He was grasping for balance, but his grip tightened in all the wrong ways. His push wasn't planned. It wasn't controlled. It was a frantic, fear-driven motion that sent Calvin stumbling backward with sudden force. For a moment, everything slowed down. Calvin's arms flailed as he tried to regain balance. His eyes widened, reflecting disbelief more than fear though his mind refused to accept what was happening. Then, in a single, irreversible second, he fell. The sound of his body hitting the stone courtyard echoed through the nearly silent house, louder than any scream. Aarav froze on the stairs, unable to move, unable to breathe. Shock overtook every part of him. He stared at Calvin's still body, the lifeless calm spreading across his face, and felt his world collapse. A few remaining guests rushed toward the courtyard after hearing the noise. Their horrified gasps filled the air. Someone shouted for help. Someone else dialed emergency services. Aarav remained on the staircase, gripping the railing, his mind unable to comprehend what he had just done. He had not meant for any of it to happen, but intent no longer mattered. In one moment of panic, he had crossed a line that could never be undone. The wedding night, which was supposed to be the beginning of a new life, had become the night everything shattered beyond repair. And the worst part was that the truth was only beginning to unfold because once the authorities arrived, nothing would remain hidden anymore. The sirens cut through the night before Aarav could even gather his thoughts. Guests stood frozen in the courtyard, their faces pale under the harsh glow of outdoor lights. Some cried, some whispered in disbelief, and others simply stared at the still figure of Calvin lying on the cold stone floor. The newlywed celebration had turned into a nightmare faster than anyone could understand. Aarav remained on the stairs, gripping the railing so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His mind spun in circles, replaying the moment again and again, Calvin slipping, Calvin falling, the sound of impact. It didn't feel real. It didn't feel possible. But Calvin wasn't moving, and that reality began to crush him from the inside. When Inspector Meera Rathore arrived, the energy in the courtyard shifted instantly. She was calm, sharp, and observant. She scanned the area, took in the positions of the guests, noticed Aarav immediately standing stiffly at the staircase. Eyes bloodshot, skin pale, sweat dripping down his temple. Something about his frozen posture told her he was not just a witness. He was involved. She didn't jump to conclusions, but her instincts sharpened. Paramedics rushed to Calvin, but the moment they checked for a pulse, their expressions told the truth. Calvin was gone. The announcement rippled through the crowd like a shockwave. People gasped. Some turned away. Others began whispering frantically. Wondering how a joyful wedding had ended in tragedy in just one night, Aarav's legs finally gave out and he sank onto the steps, his mind numb. He wanted to speak, to explain, to say something, but words refused to come. He couldn't bring himself to walk down to Calvin's side, couldn't face the man he had loved and betrayed. His heart hammered painfully, and guilt crawled over his skin like fire. Inspector Meera approached him with measured steps. She studied his trembling hands, his unfocused eyes, the way he kept glancing toward the courtyard but never dared to fully look. She asked him to come inside so they could talk, her voice steady but firm. Aarav followed her, his movements wooden, as though he were walking through water. Inside the house, Meera began piecing together the story. Guests described seeing Calvin and Aarav leaving the balcony moments before the fall. Some mentioned Calvin seemed distressed. Others recalled Aarav looking tense throughout the night. Meera's mind began forming a timeline, but she needed more than witness impressions. She needed evidence. That evidence arrived sooner than expected. Dylan Croft called the police station the moment he heard what happened. He sent the same file he had sent to Calvin, screenshots. Online complaints, connections to old scam accounts, digital footprints leading to Aarav and Ritika Sen. When Meera opened the file on her tablet, her expression changed. The case was no longer a simple accident. There was motive, history, and pressure capable of driving someone toward panic and violence. She immediately ordered officers to locate Ritika. Within hours, they found her in Delhi. When questioned, Ritika broke quickly. She admitted to working with Aarav in the past and to threatening him on the wedding night for money. She didn't intend to cause harm. She claimed only to scare him into paying. But her admission added another layer to the case. It proved Aarav had been keeping secrets and had something significant to lose. Back in Jaipur, Meera confronted Aarav with the information. His reaction, eyes dropping, shoulders shaking, tears forming, told her everything she needed to know. He tried to explain that he didn't mean to hurt Calvin, that it was panic, fear, a moment he could never take back. But confession or not, the law saw the outcome. A man was dead. Aarav was arrested before the sun rose. Cameras captured the moment he was led out of the home where he had just celebrated his wedding hours earlier. Reporters gathered quickly as news spread across India and then Canada. A love story that once seemed beautiful was now front-page tragedy, a shocking tale of secrets, deception, and a wedding night that ended with a fatal fall. Calvin's family arrived days later, heartbroken, able to comprehend how their son's dream wedding became the end of his life. They remembered him as kind, hopeful, and trusting traits that ultimately made him vulnerable to someone carrying hidden truths. Aarav's trial uncovered every detail of his past: the scams, the victims, Ritika's threats, Dylan's investigation, and the fatal moment on the courtyard steps. The court ruled that while the act wasn't premeditated, it was driven by fear and desperation, leading to a conviction that ensured Aarav would spend years behind bars thinking about the life he destroyed. The story spread around the world as a cautionary tale about the dangers of hidden pasts, rushed relationships, and the thin line between love and deception. In the end, the wedding that was supposed to be a new beginning became the final chapter for one man and the start of a lifelong punishment for another. Tragic reminder that secrets never stay buried, and the truth always finds a way to rise, no matter how deeply someone tries to hide it.